Hey everyone. We are so glad to have a new guest today. Dr. Gregory Popcak is here, and I am floored that he accepted our invitation. So I'm going to let him do most of the talking because that's what we are here for. But he and his wife, one of the things that runs when I love is that he and his wife work very closely together in a lot of the things that he covers. So you know that we love when a marriage teams up and does great things for the church. A couple things before he introduces himself and shares more. I just want to share a few of the books that we love. So Dr. Popcak is a Catholic counselor, but also an author and a radio show host and a whole bunch of other things. But just as an aside for ourselves, you've seen that we advertise How Our Family Prays Each Day is a new children's book that he and his family put together. And gosh, I love it because it really speaks to our family in its busyness and how we still try to keep Christ at the center of everything that we do, including our sports and our errands and our meals and nighttime and waking up, all of it. It was just so beautiful. He also wrote a book called Unworried, which I love as a boy mom, just trying to help encourage our boys to live a life without anxiety with all the pressures that are happening. As all of you guys know, we do like to cover a lot about sex and intimacy on our podcast, and he wrote Holy Sex, a Catholic Guide to Infallible Lovemaking, which is really practical and hands-on and so good, no pun intended. And then one book that we'll cover mostly today is Just Married, which is a Catholic guide to the first 5 years of marriage. And I'm missing a ton, so I'm going to let him share a little bit more, but those are our personal favorites. So I'm excited to chat about. And Dr. Popcak, take it away.
Oh gosh. Well, we're happy to talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. Where do you want me to start?
Let us know, what are you working on right now? What do you love doing with your wife? A little bit about, you were talking about your home ministry and your radio show and all these things.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, so there's a lot going on. The latest project really, and you mentioned the book, How Our Family Prays Each Day. Hang on, so people can see. So it's this project, this book actually is part of we're really excited about it. I worked on it with my son, who's the illustrator. And, the book was sort of an outgrowth of a larger project that we've been working on for the last 3 years with Holy Cross Family Ministries, and the USCCB actually. In 2019, we, had a symposium at Notre Dame. We hosted, a gathering of over 50, theologians, social scientists, church leaders with the goal was to look at what would it take to renew Catholic family life. And this was right before the pandemic, and domestic church life was not on anybody's radar at that point. Right. But we wanted to really look at the fact that for example, on our radio program, Work to Life, that airs on EWTN and Sirius XM 130 every day at 10 a.m. Eastern, we get a lot of calls from folks who will say, I had a great prayer life before I got married and had kids, or people will call up and they'll say, I really want to. Get my kids more involved in the faith. Like, what can we do? And it's, well, tell us a little bit about how you celebrate your faith at home. And they'll say, well, we go to church on Sunday. And I'll say, that's fantastic. But what do you do to celebrate your faith at home? And they'll say, well, the kids go to Catholic school. That's awesome. But what do you do to celebrate your faith at home? I say, well, the kids go to youth group every week. That's great, but what do you do to celebrate your faith at home? And we'll literally this conversation I'm having with you, we'll have one with you, and then it finally gets around to, we say grace every day. That's fantastic. That's a great place to start. Awesome. Maybe they'll do a family rosary. Also awesome. But Catholic families have not been given their own set of spiritual tools to really experience family life as domestic church, as a place where they can encounter Christ in meaningful ways and really experience their faith as a source of the warmth in their homes. And so that's what this whole symposium was about. 50 years after the Second Vatican Council proclaims the universal call to holiness, we're still trying to put new wine in old wineskins, right? So the big spiritual insight there is, hey, you know what? Lay people can do the liturgy of the hours. It's like, well, look, that is a beautiful prayer. Okay. I am not knocking the liturgy of the hours. It is beautiful. I don't know a lot of families who have time to do it. I do know some, but I don't know many families who have time to do the liturgy of the hours. What we really need is a domestic church based ground up spirituality. And that's what we've really created in the last 3 years with the help of our partners at the USCCB, and then and ultimately the Vatican Dicastery for Laity, Family, and Life invited us to do the opening keynote at the last World Meeting of Families at the Vatican to present this model that we've been working on. So this book, the how our family prays each day is not just about saying prayers as a family. It's really about how to bring Christ into the home and make him part of your family and live out this, what we call the liturgy of domestic church life, which is a mouthful. And, by the end of the sentence, people start falling asleep. Well, liturgy. but let me just unpack that. So first of all, what is a domestic church? Let's work backwards. Okay. So, if you look in the catechism, first of all, we use the term domestic church all the time, but nobody defines it.
Yes.
The Catechism says a domestic church is a manifestation of ecclesial reality, which is super helpful. Not at all. And I
went cross-eyed.
Yeah. It's a theological definition. Great. So the first thing we had to do as a result of this symposium was say, well, what is a domestic church and how do you become one? Right? Is it just enough to be a Catholic family and congratulations, you also get to wear the domestic church sash? I mean, what? So our working definition of a domestic church is a household of persons connected to each other and to God through the sacramental life of the church, because it's really the sacraments that make a church in the first place. And then secondly, live out to the Christian vision of love in their relationships with each other and the world. Right. So there's two parts, right? So to the degree to which your family, your household has a sacramental connection. I mean, even if you're the only Catholic in there and you go to the sacraments, there's still a sacramental connection in some way. Right, number one. And number two, the degree to which your household is committed to living out that Christian Trinitarian vision of love in your relationships with each other and the world. Now, the degree to which you can say that's true about your family already is the degree to which you already are a domestic church. The degree to which you say you kind of struggle with that is the degree to which you're called to become more of a domestic church. But just about every Catholic household can find itself somewhere along that continuum and also see that they're being called to more. So that's our working definition of what a domestic church is. So that's the second part. What's the first part? Liturgy. Okay, so this is liturgy of domestic church life. Liturgy is another word we all throw around a lot, but nobody ever really thinks about what it means. Okay? So a liturgy is a kind of worship that God gave to us, right? We human beings didn't invent it, God did. So think of the Eucharist. Nobody came up one day and said, you know what, I think we should invent the body and blood of Christ. That sounds like a great idea. Christ instituted that at the Last Supper. So that's what made it a liturgy. God gave us this form of worship that seeks to undo the damage that sin does to our relationships with God and with each other. Right? And that's what a liturgy does. It's a God-given form of worship that heals the damage that sin does to our relationships with him and each other. So this liturgy of domestic church life, we didn't invent the family, right? Human beings didn't sit down and have a council one day and say, let's describe what a family is. And in fact, every time human beings try to define what a family is, we make a hash of it, as you can tell right now, right? In our current culture. Yeah. There are 3,000 definitions, human definitions for what a family is. But at the beginning of time, God created family. And he, in addition to creating family, he also built into his design of the family certain practices that when families do these things, they are healthy and happy families. And also, united with his grace, they become holy families too. And if you look throughout history and across every culture, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, or what point in history, if you have a healthy, happy family, you do certain things, right? And again, united with God's grace, they become a little way of holiness in the family too. So this liturgy of domestic church life takes all those common family habits that God designed into his design of the family and talks about how we can use those healthy family habits as a way of growing in holiness as parents and kids. So this liturgy of domestic church life is a framework that takes a lot of the stuff you already do already. We're not asking people to dress up in liturgical colors or do certain craft projects or have, recipes or what. It'll take a lot of the stuff your family already does to be a healthy, happy family, but do it with more intention and to greater purpose and to make Christ part of that right at the center of it all. So that's, in very broad strokes, that's what the liturgy of domestic church life is. So you don't have to feel like as a parent, you're a second-class citizen in the kingdom of God because you can't spend, 400 hours at church every week, either praying or serving, that you're doing ministry work in your domestic church, which is really the most important thing you could be doing. Because your domestic church is the foundation of society and the church. I've now monologued for like 12 minutes. So I'm just gonna, so sorry about that.
I am just like, my jaw is dropping to this because this is something that you articulated it so much more clearly, but it's something that Renzo and I have spoken about and while it's good, but there's this, I don't know if it's like a resurgence or maybe because we're farther along in our parenthood now of like this retreat, like parents just wanting to go on retreat and then bring home what they learned on retreat. And not that the intentions are bad, but I think that there's a little bit of a trapping of like to go off and try to live like monastic lifestyle for a weekend and then say like, well, I have to come home and I have to have, they carve out these times of contemplative prayer and not that again, none of this is bad. But
so let me try to everything we think of as Catholic spirituality is drawn from the monastic and clerical tradition.
Yes.
Right. You look, so if you study pastoral theology, which I know all of you are going to do, but if you study pastoral theology, all right, so the 2,000 years of church history, everything that we think of as Catholic spirituality came out of the monasteries and came out of religious life, all right, and it does not fit into messy family life, right? Yeah. So the whole genius of the Second Vatican Council was, hey, you know what? Holiness isn't just for monks and religious and priests; it's for everybody. But what they did was they said that, but then they didn't do anything to give normal people like us tools that we could use. So that's what this liturgy of domestic church life is all about. And we really fight this idea as Catholic families that, I have to go away to find God. I have to go to my parish church, or I have to go to the monastery. I have to go on retreat to find. And you know what? I'm not, again, like you, we're not knocking that, right? That's that. If you can get that time, that we like to think of that as date night. Okay. Date night. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Everybody, every couple should get date night, right? But I don't know how often you get date night. We're lucky if we get it once a quarter, right?
Yep.
And, and if you save your whole marriage for date night, you're sunk, right? Yes. If you save your whole spiritual life for that retreat or that parish mission, or when you can actually squeeze out adoration time, you're sunk, right?
Yes.
And even if you do that consistently, you're missing 99.99% of the ways that God is reaching out to you through your daily family life. And so this liturgy of domestic church life gives every family, wherever they are, wherever culture. We've presented this in over 30 countries. Well, actually, at the Vatican now, over 100 countries.
Wow.
And wherever we go, wherever you are, whatever your family looks like, whatever your composition is, you can do this liturgy of domestic church life to have a healthier, happier, holier family.
Gosh,
and you can experience that right at home without having to go anywhere to find him.
Oh my goodness. I love that. I love it. I love it because the whole act of getting your kids ready to go and do those things, right. And then you miss,
right?
Yes, exactly. And again, all well-intentioned, and it's so good to expose them to those things, but to expect to receive the same thing that a single priest or nun can get out of these things out there. It just, what we receive looks different. What comes and pierces our heart, even just what we can hear is different. Right. And how, okay, so I hear this and like, how can I bring that to my own home? And we want to bring it to our home. We want to bring it to our children. We want to bring it to our spouses. So gosh, this is so needed. I appreciate it so much. So this children's book is one of the resources. What else is there for us to start learning about this, implementing this, practicing this?
Sure. Well, honestly, so because, this is a lot of, highfalutin theological stuff, right? We needed to break it down so that anybody could access it. So we created an app. Everybody's
Excellent.
got apps.
Right where we are.
So it's called Catholic Home, but it's spelled HOM. It doesn't have an E on it. It's Catholic HOM. It stands for Households on Mission. Right. And so it's actually free to download now. And with the free version, you get all the information you need to start doing this on your own. Right. So we have when you open it up, and by the way, it features all the people on the cover here. This is the home family.
Yes.
And they guide families through this whole process. So the whole point of the app is not just for moms and dads, but for you to be able to share this with your kids too. So that this is a project you're working on all together. Right. We actually as well. Let me start there. So it's free to download, and under the first icon you'll see on the app, it says "Do these steps first." It couldn't be simpler, right? And we walk you through like 5 steps there. Whether there's an orientation video to the app and to the whole idea of a liturgy of domestic church life, and then we have downloadable posters that for one for each of the 3 rites in the liturgy of domestic church life. And then we have a book and a downloadable ebook that you can take a look at to answer your deeper questions and whatever. And then, we introduce you to the discussion groups as well. So we have an online community where people are sharing their stories about how they're living this out every day and all that. And that's all free. For a premium membership, in addition to those free resources, we have monthly downloadables. We actually have a video series, an animated series of videos. So we have a Catholic Home Foundations course. And what it is, it's 6 15-minute animated videos where Lisa and I take this cartoon family through the liturgy of domestic church life. And they share all their struggles, and it's very real, right? And when people watch it, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like they had a camera in our house, We do it in a funny way that makes it accessible to the whole family. But the most important thing that we offer on the premium side is actual accompaniment. So my whole team of pastoral counselors, and we have a whole series of a group of trained Catholic family life coaches, interact with our members every day. So if people have a question about, I don't know what it means, like this rite of family rituals you talk about, like how do I get that going in my household? Or, this discipline problem came up, or my kid doesn't want to pray, or my 14-year-old says he doesn't believe in God anymore. Or, I'm having this, my spouse is on the same page as me. We don't pray. What do we do? We offer daily pastoral accompaniment to families everywhere, just talking about how to build a more loving, caring, connected Catholic family. So it's not counseling, but it's the next best thing, right? It's just daily expert accompaniment. And so our goal is to help form all the families, in doing this themselves, so that they can then start, small family-to-family faith-sharing groups in their parish or in their community. And that doesn't have to be a formal thing. You just invite people over. Bang, you have a family faith-sharing group. Okay? You sit down and you watch the cartoons together. You have dinner, you play a game. Done. It's very easy access, right? Low bar, but it's all about just, experiencing Christ more in our homes and then being able to share that love with others. So that the whole point of the app is to help you have faithful, expert Catholic help in your back pocket whenever you need it.
Gosh, I love that, because isn't that what we're missing? John Paul II talks about how our family is supposed to be the source of how we learn things. And that's just not the reality that most people live today as they're trying to start their own families and live this Catholic domestic church. So it's so great to join that.
Well, yeah, and here's the funny thing about that too. So most of what we think of as the way church ought to be is completely bass-backward, right? So we think that families exist to support the parish. Now, by all means, you should support your parish. I don't want you to I'm knocking parish. Really, if you look at the church's theology of church, parishes exist to form families. Mm-hmm. Parishes exist to form domestic churches. The parish and the diocese aren't supposed to be running 4 billion different programs. They're supposed to be teaching us how to minister to all the people that we encounter. So every domestic church is meant to be an outpost of grace in a hurting world. And we go to the parish to get fed and to receive the grace that we need to then bring that grace home, share it with each other, and let it shine out in the world.
Yeah.
But we haven't had a model for doing that.
Yeah.
And because of that, the parish has become the be all and end all, and it becomes kind of insular where we don't evangelize and we don't experience Christ at the home. It all happens at the parish. This liturgy of domestic church life model gives the church a way to write its own ecclesiology, RIGHT, its own ecclesiology, so that parishes can form families to do this kind of work that we're talking about, and not have it feel like some big onerous task.
Yeah. And I love that model that you gave of just inviting another family over for dinner. Like, gosh, we have lost the art of just having people over and spend time together, right? And just make it casual. And that even just in that act of inviting somebody into the reality of your home, there's some level of comfort to see that other families live like actual families instead of what we are seeing on social media or on TV, that like, this is real life. I say that as I look around. Our studio is our living room, and I'm like, okay, there's the pile of laundry over there, and the dog knocked the stuff over there, and just like inviting people into that. And then like, okay, how can we do this messiness with intentionality and asking for the grace to do it well?
Well, and look, I think that is the domestic church's role. So, we talk about, monastic spiritual and contemplative prayer, and, to be able to model that kind of need to step out of things to find God. But the domestic church's job is to witness to a more incarnational spirituality, where we find that God wants to enter into the mess. He wants to do the laundry with us. He wants to discipline our kids with us. He wants to play games with us. He wants to have a meal with us. It's the domestic church witnesses to experiencing Emmanuel, God with us, right? Where the monastic life witnesses to experiencing that there's more in life than just what's happening right here. So together, it presents a very whole spiritual picture, but one isn't the other. Right. We can't make our homes a monastery any more than a monastery can, suddenly open itself up to families. Right. It's just a different thing.
Right.
Gosh, but they're both beautiful.
That. Exactly. No, I love that. Just respecting them all for the way that they are meant to be, so that our world can be, our world can be what it's supposed to be, closer to Christ. And I love that. So I'm going to shift. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I just point.
Go.
So we did a poll on the Catholic Home app. It was kind of a trick question. We asked, does being a parent stop you from doing ministry? And 70% of the people who responded said yes. I said it was a trick question because family life is ministry. It is the most important ministry you can do. Because we define ministry as any act that brings God's love to another person, right? And if parenting and marriage doesn't bring God's love to another person, then I don't know what it is. So,
it's the closest.
If you're doing the kind of marriage and family life that you guys talk about on your podcast all the time, that is a ministry.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stop you from doing ministry. It is your ministry. Anyway,
yes,
please.
Exactly. No, that's it. So that, you segued better than I did. Because to start, that has to start with our marriage, right? In order for us to do this in our whole family life with our children and then invite other people in, it has to start with our marriage. So in your radio show, so you and your wife, Lisa, More to Life is your radio show. You allow callers to call in with family struggles or questions. And you've mentioned theology of the body a lot, and to help with your marriage, your family life, even your personal life. How did you first encounter theology of the body? And then how did that come into play with your marriage and that ministry to one another, husband and wife? How did that play out?
So my wife and I both graduated from Franciscan University in 1989. And I don't know if you, but we
got engaged at Franciscan, so we didn't attend there, but we got engaged in the port, so we feel like we're official.
There you go. we got married the day after graduation from Francis. But
I love that.
While we were there, so this would be in the mid to late 80s when the Holy Father is just finishing up his whole Theology of the Body Wednesday audiences, and Dr. Alan Schreck was doing the course on marriage in the theology department, and so Lisa and I both took that course and had learned very early on about theology of the body. And so, it really was the foundation of a lot of really everything that we did from the ground up, in our own relationship. And, none of this work that we're doing now would be possible without the theology of the body as a background. And it was even Archbishop Chaput who noted that St. John Paul wrote like 2/3 of everything that's ever been written in the church on family life. So, yeah, right. So this whole, I mean, my argument is, and nobody, I don't hear anybody else talking about this, but so I might be crazy, but my argument is that St. John Paul's mission in his pontificate was actually to kind of put flesh on the bones of this idea of a universal call to holiness, because everything he did was really all about, okay, well, how, if we're going to say that, there needs to be a means of holiness for lay people, then what could we use that they have in common? Well, gosh, everybody has a body. Let's
yes. Yes.
So the body has got to be the basis for this, because if we're going to talk about a spiritual theme that runs across every human person that they can relate to and use, we can start there. What is God saying to us through our bodies? And so, that becomes the basis then for everything else he did, anyway, so the theology of the body really is the core of everything we've done since the very beginning.
Yeah.
Short answer.
Yeah, no, perfect. And I love that. I love that it informs what the work that you do, right? And the work, in helping and supporting domestic churches and helping and supporting marriages. And I imagine even in your counseling as well, that this plays a role, as well.
Well, because the whole focus of the theology of the body was, in his words, to present an adequate anthropology. The idea of what does it mean to be a Christian human person, right?
Yeah.
And counseling is all about being a fully formed human person. So the theology of the body is the framework for everything we do in the practice and everything we do in the.
We've recently been discussing one of his pieces of work that it was actually to a group of priests and bishops who came to Notre Dame on human formation. But we're like, oh my goodness, this totally applies to just everybody, like how to just be a person, like a holistic spiritual body, psychological person. So so good. And you've written many books, like I listed at the beginning. I only listed like a fraction. But in Just Married, it's specific to the first 5 years of marriage. Can you maybe shed some light onto why do you think it was so important to narrow down the scope and talk about those first 5 years of marriage? What is so integral about that time?
Most divorces happen within the first 10 years. And many of those happen within the first 5 years. Our society has really forgotten what it takes to have a healthy marriage and family life. And even many devout Christians have forgotten, because we weren't raised in, healthy families, and so we're trying to make it up as we go. And so we wanted to present a guide that would help couples get off on the right foot. And really understand what it means to live the Catholic difference of marriage from the very beginning. Lisa and I were very blessed. We neither of us came from perfect families, certainly, but we were introduced to this idea of the theology of the body very early on, and got this vision. We were both very faithful Christians very early on in our lives. And that enabled us to really understand that Catholic difference and try to start living it out. And we didn't live it out perfectly by any stretch, but at least we had a vision, right? We knew what we were aiming at. And our aim improved as the years went by. First, we just missed the target altogether.
Blindfolded. Just kidding.
Exactly. So first the blindfold, then you learn to not aim the bow. But the theology of the body gave us a target to shoot at, right? And so, we wanted to be able to give couples that same target, to be able to lay out this vision for the Catholic difference of marriage, so that they could start from the very beginning saying, what does it mean to be a Catholic couple? So that we could encounter Christ and invite Christ to be part of our marriage from the very, very beginning. And a big part of that too, then is how do you establish regular couple prayer? That's not something that we're taught as well. Again, going back to that idea, monastic prayer is more individual, or it's corporate in the sense of we celebrate Mass together, or we say hours together, whatever. But we don't do couple prayer, whereas in marriage it's essential, right? Because the whole point of Catholic marriage, the reason you don't get to write your vows, is because you're not inventing your marriage as far as the church is concerned. You're apprenticing to what God's vision of marriage should be. And so, we like to say that, you can have a marriage where there's Christians in it, but you can't have a Christian marriage unless you're praying together. And every day, we all have love in our hearts, right? All of us have a ton of love in our hearts. We want to give it. We want to receive it. But none of us really knows how to love each other the way God wants us to, right? And so we have to every day sort of, pray with each other and go into the presence of God and say, okay, God, I don't know what to do, right? I love this person so much. I don't know how to love her the way you want me to. Please show me, and my wife will make the same kind of a prayer, okay, it's Monday. And here are the 10,000 things we're worried about. We don't know how to do any of them. And we certainly don't know how to love each other while we do them. Please show us. Right. And and that's the poverty of spirit, that the Beatitude talks about, that enables us to really find that kingdom of God. Because when you're just asking God, show us, please, we don't know, we have this love, but we don't know what to do with it. And so, the book really kind of talks about not just couple prayer, but how to create a structure for your relationships that makes sure that you have time for each other, that you don't grow apart, that kind of lays out some of the common stages that couples go through in those first 5 years and how to navigate those stages prayerfully and gracefully. And those sorts of things, so that from the very beginning, you're placing Christ at the heart of your relationship and letting him teach you how to have the marriage he wants you to have, instead of the marriage your parents had or your friends have, or that you read in a book somewhere that you should have. But how can you figure out what God is calling you to have?
Yeah, I love that. I love that prayer that you mentioned. I remember reading like the versions that you had written, both you and Lisa. It was neat to see how Greg writes that prayer, like how Greg says that prayer versus how Lisa says that prayer, and how they're similar but unique to each individual. But I think it's also so beautiful, the vulnerability of not just saying that prayer alone, like you were saying, that to say it together so that you hear like the intention of your spouse, and you allow them to be a little bit weak and vulnerable, but also like in your weakness, that's where you find God's strength, is to bring that weakness to Christ and say, like, I don't know how to do this well. I have the best intentions, help me do this. And I think to do that together is so integral to forming that intimacy in marriage. So good.
Well, and one of the side points that we don't actually touch on this in the book, but it's the fact of it, one of the keys to intimacy is making it safe to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you can't have intimacy where it's not safe to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that prayer, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing. I want to love her the way you want me to, but I don't know how to do that. It's also, in addition to the grace that you receive from that, it's also making it safe to make mistakes with each other, because you're actively every day saying, look, these are my best intentions. I really do want to love you better.
Yes.
So if I'm getting it wrong, tell me.
Yes, right. Kindly. Yeah.
Well, it's safe to make those mistakes, right? So,
right.
But you understand where even the mistakes are coming from then.
Yes.
So you're able
right.
to challenge each other in that kinder way.
Oh, yes. Oh, so good. You had also mentioned families of origin, where we come from and our background. One of the main questions that we get asked a lot from our listeners is about that transition from our families of origin to our new family, and how we set charitable boundaries, and how, we might want to look similar in some ways and different in other ways. And in truth, one of the reasons why we haven't covered this in a whole episode is, out of respect and privacy of our own families. So would you mind sharing a little bit more about how to go about that? How to lovingly, but healthily set boundaries to create this new family, this new domestic church?
Well, and I think, honestly, and this is where I think Catholic Home, the app I was talking about before, Catholic HOM, can be helpful for even young couples without kids, because in this liturgy of domestic church life provides a framework for what you need to be making time for, right? Because I think very often when couples come to us, either they call the show or they come to counseling because of those issues with boundaries with the family, it tends to be based on how I feel. When his family does this, it really annoys me. When her family does that, it really upsets me. How can I set a boundary? And what we need, though, is some kind of a framework that allows us to say, well, what are we setting a boundary for? Right? What are we trying to protect within those boundaries? right? And so this idea of this framework of the liturgy of domestic church life kind of establishes certain practices or habits that you want to be making time for. So, for instance, in the second, rites are building blocks of a liturgy, RITE, are building blocks of. So the second rite of the liturgy of domestic church life is the rite of family rituals. So we encourage families every day to find little ways to work, play, talk, and pray together. So, like do the dishes together, or, or clean up the room before bed, or, have a conversation about something more than just how was your day? Oh, fine. Really just talk about, how you can take better care of each other that day. Do something fun with each other, even if it's, 10 minutes on a game of cards or walk around the neighborhood, and pray together every day. So, if you are, let's say that you're trying to create those rituals of connection in your marriage. Because in the early years, especially if you marry young, it's kind of easy because you don't have a lot to do. And so you end up just doing those things naturally. But then as you have kids or the job gets busier or family starts, whatever, then all of a sudden that stuff gets lost and you start growing apart. So we're trying to teach couples from the very beginning to be very intentional about those rituals of connection, enabling them to work, play, talk, and pray together every day. So let's say you're trying to do that, but your family of origin, keeps intruding on that ability to do that. Well, that's an important way to send a boundary then. You say, okay, mom and dad, we want to be part of your lives, but we need to make sure that we're getting this time to work and play and talk and pray together every day. So that now we're going to set a boundary around that. So we can, around the holidays, well, we want you to be part of everything that our family always did. Well, yes, but we also need to create some ways to work and play and talk and pray together as a couple around the holidays. And that's what we need to figure that out so that we can be, and so that becomes part of the conversation then, right? And again, there are other parts to this liturgy of domestic church life that help you clarify those boundaries, but it gives you a framework that you can begin to kind of pray and talk about it as a couple and make informed decisions as opposed to just reactive decisions based on his family annoys me when they do this, or her family really upsets me when they do that, so they need to stop it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that way of thinking because then, and our feelings often speak to something. They're trying to give us a hint towards something, but we need to follow that and get to the root of it. So why does it bother me? Is it interrupting one of those 4 things that we're doing together? Is it interrupting, our way of marital intimacy versus sonship and daughtership level of intimacy, and where's the line in that? So I think that's so important to try to distinguish for ourselves. That's so good.
And the other thing on that, just keeping it it's your family of origin's job to support you, right? It's your family of origin's job to support you in building your domestic church, right? Yeah. So if you feel like, oh my gosh, we never have time to build our own domestic church because we're so busy taking care of, mom and dad or attending to then that's disordered, right? So you have a right to set some boundaries around that. So this liturgy of domestic church life gives you a framework for what a domestic church should look like so that your parents even know how to support you in doing that. So one of the things that we're hoping will happen with home as we expand the offerings is to be able to use it to train mentor couples. Right. Because right now, mentor couple programs are just sort of idiosyncratic. It's like, oh, congratulations, you made it to 50 years. You must know something about marriage. Teach it to them, and it might not apply at all. Right. So part of our hope is that by getting couples to go through this liturgy of domestic church life training on the app and get the accompaniment and live it out in their own lives, they can kind of present the framework to other couples and say, okay, well, here's how we do it. You might not do it that way, but you can use that same framework to figure it out for yourselves. But we're here for you if you need us,
Yeah. I think that's so great. And I think I try to remember too, even with our own families, that just as much as it's a transition for us, it's a transition for them as well. It's a learning process for all of us to figure out our new roles in all of this. One of our mottos with Pre-Cana with the Pope is to try to restore confidence in marriage and family life. And in your book, you say that couples have what it takes, which I love. And it's a matter of tapping into that, and then also the willingness to learn the skills to be successful. Can you give some examples of what those new skills might be when it comes to transitioning from individual to family or marriage life? And why is it so important to be open to learning if you don't have those skills already?
Yeah, well, and I want to emphasize, nobody has those skills, right? I mean, even if you came from the best family of origin, you haven't spent your life loving this person that you're now married to, right? And God brought you guys together for a specific reason, right? And you don't know what that is either yet. And so we all need to learn those skills, right? We all need to learn those couple prayer skills and discernment skills. We need to learn those listening skills, not just to hear what the person is saying, what our spouse is saying, but kind of really start to understand why they're saying it, and what's behind what they're saying.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would say, people ask us all the time, what's the biggest problem in marriage? And they always expect us to say something like, I don't know, infidelity or, addictions or arguments, whatever.
Yeah, biggie, yeah.
But it all kind of comes under this umbrella of we all have a tendency to love our comfort zone more than we love each other. Right? We all love our comfort zones more than we love each other. And so the most important skill any couple, any family, any Christian couple and family especially can learn is how do I love this other person more than I love my comfort zone? Right. And so if your spouse is asking you, now obviously, there's things you can say no to. I mean, if they're asking you to do something that's immoral or objectively demeaning, you have to say no to that. But other than that, there's not, that covers a lot of ground, right? That leaves a lot of things left. So, generally speaking, if your spouse is asking you to do something, it's because they're asking that because God put them in your life to ask you that. Because if they weren't in your life, you wouldn't grow that way, right? And so God gave you this person so that you would grow in ways you'd never grow if you were on your own. So saying yes to that thing, even if it stretches you, even if it makes you a little uncomfortable, even if now you can ask them to be patient with you. You can say, look, that's really not me. And I have a really hard time with that, but I love you. And I recognize that God gave you to me. And so I'm going to do my best. Right. So please be patient. That's fine. But we have to be open. We have to learn that skill. And again, I think that goes back to that idea of a poverty of spirit, that willingness to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to love you the way you need to be loved, but I'm willing to learn. And so those kinds of skills of couple prayer and discernment, listening and loving each other more than your comfort zone, will get you a long way, but and to go back to the beginning of our conversation, those are the kinds of things that are at the heart of a marital and family spirituality. Right. And that's hard work. You do that stuff, you're growing in holiness. That's your little way of holiness in the home. And honestly, for most couples, it's easier to run to adoration than it is to do that stuff.
Yes.
Yes. I'm not knocking adoration. Okay. But if you're looking for ways to mortify yourself during Lent, learning to love your spouse and your kids more than your comfort zone is going to get you a whole lot more mileage than any other sacrifice you could do. And it's right there in front of your face. Right.
Because what is the thing that looks like the cross for you? Right. Like what is heavy to carry? What is that burden? But then that burden brings about new life. That burden is like that epitome of what love looks like. And
just to clarify, not just because it's heavy, but because it's the loving thing to do. So, and that's something that we work with a lot of our clients, right? So, I'll have a lot of clients who are married to truly unhealthy people, who think that it's their cross to put up with that unhealthy thing.
Yes.
Really, the cross in that situation is to not put up with that healthy thing, to set healthy boundaries around that unhealthy thing that that prophetically invites their spouse to be a healthier, holier person. Right. Yes. So in all but that's not comfortable. That's scary. Right. I'm used to putting up with the unhealthy thing.
Yes.
Right. So what makes me leave my comfort zone for the love of my spouse is saying, I can't put up with the drinking anymore, or I can't put up with the abuse anymore. I can't, that's scary. That's, that's where, but that's where the holiness comes in, both for you and your spouse.
Right. Exactly. Because that's when it's that total self gift, because here I'm going to go outside of my comfort zone for your good as well. Right. And to call you to the life that Christ has for you, and the life that I know that you can live because I love you like that, right? Like that I love you. I love you enough for us both to be uncomfortable right now and to call each other to that greatness.
Yeah.
So good. There's a couple other areas of couple other marital areas that people ask about often. We talked a lot about a shared prayer life, and then the other two are often passive spouses. So the spouses that, are willing to do if they're told what to do, like here I am to serve without necessarily taking that initiation. And then of course, sexual intimacy. So, couple questions. Let's see all right. How can we encourage a spouse who, again, the intentions are good. I'm here. I want to serve. I love, but is lacking that next step of initiation. How can we foster that in our marriage to switch from passive to initiation?
Well, I think there are sort of two steps there. And a lot of people, and this is a lot of men really who you hate to speak in generalities, but generally speaking, and a lot of us men are raised in households where we're not expected to do anything, right? Except, or we just do what you're told and, stay out of trouble, whatever. And so we come by it honestly. And then and then we're told by our wives, oh, you're supposed to be the spiritual head of the home. We have no clue what that means. Right.
Yeah.
So, but that said, we can learn. We're not completely hopeless. The first thing is the importance of kind of maybe talking about, doing a little bit of education around what's called emotional labor. Like, cause the person who shows up and does what they're told, they think they're helping. Right. But that's only like 10% of the task. Emotional labor speaks to the other 90%, right? So whenever there's a task to be done, I have to think about what the task is, when it's going to get done, what are the things we need to get it done? How do I make sure it stays done? All that stuff, that's the emotional labor that goes into doing the task. The person who tends to be more passive tends to not be aware of all that emotional labor. They think the task is 100% of the job. And so kind of talking to them about, look, I really appreciate you helping with this part, but really it's only 10%, because the other 90% was thinking of, oh gosh, this needs to be done. And how am I going to get it done? And where are we going to get the time? And and I really need your help with all those pieces of it too. Right. Because like the person who's married to that passive spouse feels guilty because, well, they do show up. I mean, they do whatever I tell them. What's wrong with me that I'm never satisfied? Well, it's because 90% of the job is still your job, right? So if you can spell that out for them, and yourself, then you know what you're asking for. You're not really just asking for them to help you do the job. You're asking for help in all of it, right?
Yeah.
So really kind of understanding that idea of emotional labor is really key. The other part of it, though, is when you're married to a passive person, you get used to doing all the emotional labor and then just presenting it to them, and then they show up. It's going to be important to make them partners from the ground up, going to them and saying, here is this problem, and I really need some input from you on what to do about it. And then they'll say, I don't know. And then you just sit. Like, well, yeah, but I really need your input on this because I need, and then make them come up with ideas.
Yeah.
Make it, be there in that, the discomfort you were talking about before, right? Love them enough to create a little bit of tension, a little bit of discomfort that lets them, but if you keep going to them and saying, well, I need you to do this, 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 and this, and this, and then I need you to be my partner. Well, I don't have room to be your partner. You've already scripted it all out.
Yeah.
You tell me to show up, I show up, and then that's not good enough. Nothing's ever good enough for you.
Yep.
So you're going to have to make them part of the whole process and create space where it's safe for them to just stumble around and figure out what that process is going to be. And it's going to be super uncomfortable for the more, hyper responsible spouse to do that. But there's your mortification again, and the more you can do both of those things, the more you're creating space for them to know that it's safe to do this stuff, because in their family of origins, for one reason or another, it wasn't, and that you actually really do want them to say something, and it's okay if they say something different from you.
Yes.
Because let's be honest, if you're married to a passive person, it's probably in part because you kind of like to be a little controlling yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. God bless you. Bless your heart, but
the charitable way to say, take a chill pill.
Exactly. But there's probably a part of you that kind of liked being able to make all the decisions for a while, and now you're just burned out on it, and you're mad at them for not catching on sooner. So give them some space, but not just like stay out of their way, but like create. Hey, here's the problem. I really need your help with this. What do you think we should do about it?
Yeah.
And then leave it there.
Yes.
And if they say, I don't know, it's like, well, think about it. We'll talk about it again tomorrow.
Yes.
Have you thought about it anymore? What do you think? I still don't know. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about it again tomorrow. You let them know they're not going to get off the hook,
Yeah.
And then if that doesn't work, then you need some counseling. Honestly, that needs somebody else to kind of help step in and give them skills.
Yeah. But I love that. I love that point though, that their answer could and very likely may be different from yours. And again, that's where the beauty of marriage comes in, is that like the way that you've been doing it all this time was fine, but your marriage is made for better than fine. It's made for both of you. So to allow that, that other perspective to like be infused in your home life can actually like bear a lot of fruit once it gets initiated.
Well, going back to the Just Married book, so the first stage in marriage is the honeymoon stage, but the next stage is sort of conflict and negotiation stage, where we kind of try to bring our two worlds together and figure out how we're going to do stuff as a unique couple, which leads to the next stage, which is the new pattern stage, where we've sort of identified how we function as a couple, right? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of couples who, especially if you're married to a more passive spouse, you never get past that second stage because there's no conflict and negotiation. There's no conflict. So we just do what you tell me to do. And then, you're 20 years into the marriage and you don't really have a lot of intimacy because you never work through those stages that every couple has to go through to be able to create that sense of a unique identity as a couple. So that's really important to create that space for that.
Yeah. So good. Thank you for that. And I really appreciate so much the, everything that you've been talking about has been like going back to that foundation. What are we building our family life on? And I think your mission with home is really trying to foster that, is to like go, all of these pieces are a part of family life, and to start from the ground and work up is the way that we're going to build a strong and sturdy domestic church. All right. Last but not least, how can couples get on the same page in regards to sexual intimacy? I love the title of the book. I mean, I think we've had this since we got married, but holy sex is like, and you use that phrase too in the Just Married book. And I just think that so many people are like, I'm not allowed to use those two words next to each other. Right. And I think that's the myth that you're trying to dispel here. So I don't know. Can you share a little insight into, why did you call that? Like, why did you use that phrase when you're talking about marital intimacy?
Well, because, and this is one of the things we talk about early in the book, our culture is saturated in what we call eroticism, but we really don't know anything about what we call holy sex. Right. So when the church says that sex is holy, or the church, talks about, inviting God into your marital intimacy, and that just seems offensive and weird and creepy to people because they think eroticism, somehow I'm supposed to invite God into porn. That doesn't make any sense. Well, it shouldn't make any sense because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking, so eroticism is different from holy sex, and holy sex, where eroticism is just, it's about using the other person. Holy sex is about creating intimacy with the other person. Where eroticism is closed to the idea of life. Holy sex celebrates life. Where eroticism actually alienates other people because they feel used. Holy sex invites deeper intimacy because we're creating something beautiful together. And those are just some examples, but we kind of do a side-by-side product comparison between eroticism and holy sex in the book, and help people really understand that when the church talks about sex, they're using the same words that the world does, but they're defined entirely differently. They're completely different concepts. And so this is all part of that idea that, we have all this love in our hearts, but we don't know how to love each other, right? Well, again, the theology of the body is all about learning how to love others with our bodies in a way that God wants us to, right? And so we come out of this eroticism culture, completely ignorant about how to use our bodies in ways that actually work for the good of the other person and create true godly intimacy. So holy sex is all about that. So again, it begins with that idea that, I don't really know how to love this other person, right? And so, I don't have to pretend that I don't have the desires that I do. I don't have to pretend that I don't have the fears or the doubts or the squeamishness that I do. But I have to bring it all to God and say, Lord, teach me what to do with this, right? I've got this desire, but I don't know how to express that desire in a way that actually builds up my spouse and makes this marriage work. I have this fear of being used or treated. I don't know how to respond to that in a way that will actually lead us closer to each other instead of just having me put up walls, and alienate us. How do I do this? Right. And so holy sex is really that process of working through all that stuff together, as opposed to eroticism, which is just, basically let's use friction to make each other feel good. Right. And that's all it does. Right? So, I mean, holy sex still feels good, but it's so much more.
Right. And I love that, that working through that process together, whether it's like reading that book together or saying that prayer together, saying that prayer out loud to one another. Like, I have these desires and I want to use them well. And I want to use them to love you better. And then also on the other end, being open and receptive to hearing that from our spouse and wanting to just like to really listen instead of just hear the words that they're saying. And again, going back to that concept that you said too, that intimacy is a safe place to make mistakes. And I think that in the bedroom, that's a very important place to allow for, like safety for mistakes, a little bit of humor, a little bit of the honesty of some squeamishness or nerves or things like that. But then also the safe place to be completely open and vulnerable, to be completely, be completely enjoying yourself. And I think that sometimes there's also this, like, that holy sex idea is like, wait, am I actually allowed to really enjoy this? Am I allowed to really, is this allowed to be really intimate and fun and bring us closer together in more areas than making a baby, right? Like, I think a lot of times we're like, well, it's Catholic, so it has to be rightly ordered towards procreation. Well, it's also for the unity too. And that's really okay. That's what's at work here, So I appreciate that fullness of the book to be able to do that together, work through that together.
I don't have it, memorized, but there's a quote actually from St. John Chrysostom in the book that talks about sex. Actually, he was very, very open about talking about the beauty and the holiness of marital intimacy. And you said, and you who are scandalized by me talking about this, you're pagans, because God created this beautiful thing and for it to be enjoyed and celebrated, and it's holy. And, how dare you make something that's holy not holy, and I mean, he's very, very upfront about that. And, now again, he's not talking about eroticism. He's not suggesting that porn can be holy, right? He's not suggesting that using each other can be holy. He's not suggesting that cheating on your spouse is. He's talking about holy sex, which is a very different thing the world can offer.
Right.
And that's the first hurdle we need to get over. We all know, we all have PhDs in eroticism, but none of us know anything about sex. And so that's part of that apprenticeship and love that the Catholic marriage is meant to be.
I love that phrase, apprenticeship and love. Well, Dr. Popcak, thank you so very much. Is there anything that you want to make sure is shared, or any last words of encouragement?
The Catholic vision of marriage and family is for everybody. It's not just for special families. It's not for perfect families. It's not for perfect. It's for any couple or family that wants to experience God's love more perfectly. All right. And so, but if you can be humble enough to say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to learn, and do that in prayer, that's like 90% of the job right there. What does St. Paul say? God's power is made perfect in our weakness. Right. And so having said that, if you would like more support, I really can't encourage you enough to download the Catholic Home app. As I said, it's free to download it. I would love for you to become a premium member. That's how the thing supports itself. But whatever level of support you want, we're there to provide it. And as a premium member, we give you all the resources and all the daily accompaniment, to do that. We do live streams like this every month. And so, whatever support you want, we're there to provide that. And if you need more intensive support, we can help connect you with good, faithful counseling as well. But that's what the Catholic Home app is there for, to really give you that faithful, expert Catholic support right there in your back pocket. So if you go to CatholicHOM.com or just download it on your Apple or Google Play Store, it's right there for you at Catholic HOM. Thanks for letting me do the little commercial there.
No, of course. I really appreciate it. And we will...
And of course the book.
Yes. Yeah, check out
season.
the reel on Instagram. Gianna is the star of that. She does a little. We did one of the trendy dances, but had little kids do the dance. So people love that. So we will have all of these resources that you've mentioned also in the show notes. So all the listeners, check those out, please. And then also, that we are big proponents of mental health and being humble and willing enough to learn that, or to admit that those are skills that we need help with, or that, there's something else affecting our lives that we could use more holistic approach to. So Catholic Counselors is I know the handle on Instagram, and we'll have a link to their website as well. And we'll link some of the books that we mentioned today, and all that good stuff will be there. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We just so admire the work that you are doing with your team, and then the work that you do with your wife to really show that, like, hey, I can talk about marriage, but like, if my wife's not involved in this, if we're not involved in this together, then really I'm just saying things, right? I think that that's so important to be able to do that work together. And I think it's so cool that your son was the illustrator of the children's book, like this whole family affair. So cool. So we will,